At the party, I spilled wine on the floor, just a small splash in accident. But my father didn't care. His hand cracked across my face before I could even apologize. I hit the floor. Blood hit the marble, and his voice, louder than the music, shook the room. "Useless girl. Get out." Everyone froze, except my brother. He looked away. I stood up shaking. My cheek burned. My pride burned more. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I walked out, heels echoing down the hallway like gunshots no one stopped to hear. The night air was freezing. My car windows fogged as I drove in silence, hand trembling on the wheel. When I got home, I tossed my heels in the hallway and checked my phone. 53 missed calls, not one out of concern. Every single one to control me. And that was the moment I realized I had nothing left to lose. People say legacy is a gift. In my family, it was a weapon. The Draytons were Seattle royalty. My father, Michael Drayton, ran half the city's commercial real estate and acted like he owned the other half. My brother Carter followed neatly in his footsteps, smart, composed, and quiet when it mattered most. And me, I was the girl they liked to introduce as our youngest, with a polite smile and a tight grip on my elbow as if they feared I'd say something embarrassing. I learned early not to speak too much or take up space or make mistakes. My mother passed when I was 11. After that, the house became colder than winter. Father became obsessed with grooming Carter into a public figure and controlling everything I did. My clothes, my school, my words, everything was measured against the Drayton name. I was just a reflection. And when my reflection didn't please him, he shattered it. Still, I tried. I kept my head down, got decent grades. I graduated college last spring and got a quiet job at a nonprofit helping displaced teens. Nothing flashy, nothing scandalous. But to my father, that wasn't success. It was weakness. "You gave up a seat in law school," he'd said, scowling at my acceptance letter as if it insulted him. "You want to help people donate money? Don't waste your life." So when the gala invitation arrived, the annual Drayton Foundation holiday party, I hesitated. I knew I wasn't welcome in the way Carter was. I wasn't a speech giver or a ribbon cutter, but I showed up anyway in a black dress Mom once wore. Quiet, respectful. I just wanted to prove I could exist there without causing problems. The mansion was packed, glass chandeliers, polished silverware, people with last names that opened doors mine never did. I smiled at people who barely looked at me. I poured wine for guests when the waiters were stretched thin. I listened to my father's booming laughter from across the room and watched Carter nod beside him like a shadow with a pulse. And for a few moments, I almost believed I'd done it. I'd survived the evening. Then my heel caught the edge of the rug. The wine sloshed forward, slow motion, and hit the floor in a wide crimson arc. My breath caught, my heart dropped. And then he turned. The slap came faster than the shame. But the truth is, the violence didn't start with his hand. It started years ago with the way he spoke about me when he thought I wasn't listening. With every time he called me soft, fragile, disposable, the slap just proved he meant it. The slap echoed louder than the music. My head snapped to the side, and I stumbled back, wine glass shattered beneath my heels, my balance lost. I tasted blood before I even realized I was bleeding. My lip had split against my own teeth. A warm trail dripped down my chin and onto the white marble. For a moment, no one breathed. Eyes locked on me, some wide with shock, others narrowed with curiosity. No one moved. No one said anything. Then his voice cut through the silence like a knife. "Useless girl. Get out." He didn't shout it like a father. He shouted it like a CEO firing dead weight, like he had wanted to say it for years and just needed the right stage. The room didn't gasp. It didn't protest. It absorbed the violence like it had seen it all before. My cheeks stung. My pride cracked open like a rib, but I didn't crumble. I turned to Carter. He stood across the room, frozen in place, a glass of scotch in his hand, the same one Father had handed him earlier, with a proud clap on the shoulder. He looked at me. Then he looked away. Not in shame, in silence. The kind of silence that chooses safety over truth. He didn't step forward. He didn't say my name. And that somehow hurt more than the slap. Because I wasn't asking for him to fight. I just wanted to matter. The ballroom was still glowing behind me as I walked out. The chandeliers hummed. The guests resumed murmuring, talking about business and stocks and vacations, as if the moment had been a glitch, not a wound. I walked across the gravel driveway with shaky hands and bloody lips, heels scraping the stone. My car was cold when I slid in. My fingers trembled against the steering wheel. I didn't cry. Not then. I didn't give them that. What I felt wasn't sadness. It was Claritia blades slicing through years of fog. I saw it all so clearly now. The dinners where I was invisible. The birthdays where I got lecture instead of love. The careful conditioning that told me I was lucky to even be tolerated. I had thought this party might be a step toward healing. Instead, it was the final blow. I drove home in silence, the snow falling like ash outside. I could still hear his voice in my skull. Useless girl, as if he'd carved it there. I pressed my fingers to my lip and winced. The blood had dried, but the sting remained. When I walked into my apartment, I tossed my coat over the chair, kicked off my heels, and turned on the light. My phone lit up instantly. 53 missed calls from father, from Carter, from the family's assistant, from Drayton Estate. Not one said, "Are you okay?" Not one asked, "Did you make it home safe?" I sat on the edge of my bed and stared at the screen because I knew those calls weren't about concern. They were about control. I didn't answer any of the calls. Not at first. I just sat there staring at the numbers on my screen. Names that once meant family now felt more like corporate threats. I could already hear their voices in my head, layered with that fake concern, that tight clip tone they used when they were trying to make a mess disappear. I tossed the phone face down onto the couch, but it buzzed again and again. A voicemail finally broke through. Harper, my father's voice, cold, composed. Last night was unfortunate, but accidents happen. Let's not blow this out of proportion. You embarrassed yourself. Don't embarrass this family any further. Unfortunate. That's what he called it. Not assault, not humiliation, not bleeding in front of 50 people while my own brother looked away. No, it was an inconvenience to him. A PR hiccup. I played it twice, trying to catch any hint of remorse. There was none, just a warning wrapped in diplomacy. Another text came in from Carter. We should talk. Maybe you misread the moment. Don't let emotions ruin what's left. What's left of what my dignity. My place at the table I was never truly invited to. I stood up suddenly, dizzy with fury. My reflection caught in the hallway mirror, lip bruised, mascara smudged from wind and sweat. I looked like a ghost version of myself. Then I saw something else. Tucked behind a dusty candle on my bookshelf, buried under years of ignored memories, was a small notebook, spiral-bound, faded green cover. I pulled it down with shaky hands and opened it. My old high school journal. But it wasn't full of dreams or crushes. No, it was a record. A quiet archive of moments I had forced myself to forget because remembering made them heavier. Dinner. He said I should wear less black, made me look like I was mourning my own future. Carter got a Rolex. I got silence. Father told the guests I dropped out of college. I hadn't. Page after page, I'd written it down because I needed proof, at least for myself, that I wasn't imagining it, that I wasn't crazy or oversensitive, that there was a pattern, a system. I flipped to the last page blank until now. I grabbed a pen and scrolled across the top. The night he hit me. Then slowly, deliberately, I began to write where it happened, who was there, what he said, what Carter didn't say. I didn't know yet what I was going to do with it, but it felt like the first brick in something I might eventually build. Not a case, not yet, but maybe a backbone, because I had spent my whole life shrinking, making myself smaller to survive. Now finally, I felt something shift. I was done surviving. The next morning, the sky outside my window was still gray. Seattle winter had that way of pressing down on you, like even the weather was trying to keep you quiet. I hadn't slept much, just drifted in and out, clutching the green notebook like it could keep me grounded. My phone hadn't stopped buzzing. More calls from the estate. A curt email from the family's PR rep. Someone named Dana I'd only met twice. We're hoping this can be resolved quietly. Please refrain from making public statements or involving outside parties. There it was again. Not a single word about what he did, just containment, damage control. I slammed the laptop shut and stood. I needed to breathe, escape the echo chamber of my apartment before I drowned in it. So I got in my car and drove not toward work, not toward the gym, but toward a name I hadn't spoken aloud in years. Lena, my father's younger sister. The woman he never mentioned unless followed by the words reckless, emotional, or embarrassment. The woman who disappeared from family gatherings over a decade ago. I remembered whispers that she'd refused to marry the man Michael picked for her, that she'd sold her inheritance to fund a nonprofit in Vermont, that she'd told him during one final screaming match, "Your kingdom is built on fear." She was the only adult who'd ever stood up to him, and I needed someone like that now. She lived in a quiet brownstone just off Davis Square. The buzzer still had her name on it, L. Drayton. My fingers hovered over it, then pressed. A long pause, then a voice. "Hello, it's Harper," I said, my voice cracking. I don't know if you come up?" She opened the door without another word. The apartment was warm, cluttered, lived in books everywhere. Photos of dogs and mountains, and there she was standing by the window with a mug in hand. Same red curls streaked with silver now, same sharp eyes, same defiant fire in her spine. "I've been waiting for you," she said simply. I broke. I told her everything about the slap, the silence, the voicemails, the pressure to stay quiet. She didn't flinch, didn't blink. When I was done, she poured me tea and said, "You know your father once hit me too, not with his hand, with his words repeatedly publicly until I started believing him." I stared at her. "What did you do?" She smiled. I walked out. Then I built a life so solid he couldn't shake it with even one word. We sat there in silence for a moment. Then she added, "They want your silence, Harper, because your voice is the one thing they can't control." And just like that, I knew I hadn't come here to escape. I'd come here to begin. Lena made space for me in the guest room. It was nothing fancy, just a twin bed, a crooked bookshelf, and a view of the alley, but it was the first place I'd felt safe in days. She didn't ask me to explain myself again. She just left me with a blanket and a simple sentence. "Tomorrow we start." I didn't ask what that meant. I just nodded. By morning, the plan began with coffee and a printer that jammed every 3 pages. Lena pulled out folders from a storage box labeled Drayton Michael Legal. Inside were emails, letters, old financial statements, all dated years ago, but all painted the same picture. A man obsessed with power, intimidation, and silence. "He's done this before," she said, flipping through a document. To me, to former employees, to at least one ex-business partner that mysteriously settled before trial. She looked up. "You think your slap was personal?" It was a pattern. I swallowed hard. My phone buzzed again, now at 97 missed calls. The latest text was short. "Final warning. Let this go or face the consequences. MJ, MJ." My own father now referred to himself like a brand. Not Dad, not even Michael. MJ, it didn't scare me. Not anymore. It just made something in me harden. Lena pointed to my green notebook. "That's your core. Now we build around it. Times, places, witnesses, anything you remember, even if it felt small." We started writing the gala, the fundraiser last fall, where he told a reporter I was between jobs. The Christmas he gave Carter a new car and told me, "Your presence is enough. Be grateful." The voicemail. I recorded it, saved it, backed it up. Then Lena showed me how to encrypt files, how to draft an email that wouldn't trace, how to pull public records on every company my father owned. By evening, we had a full timeline on her dining table, highlighted, time-stamped, sourced. Then she slid her laptop toward me. "You should see this," she said. It was a spreadsheet from a leak. Real estate transfers. One caught my eye. A beachfront property in Cape Ann transferred to an offshore trust 3 days after the gala. A sudden move, a panicked one. He was hiding assets, preparing for fallout. "He's scared," I whispered. Lena nodded. "They always are, but only when they realize you're not a little girl anymore." That night, I stood in the hallway outside the guest room, staring at a framed photo of her as a teenager, younger, softer, but still with that glint of rebellion. I wondered if I had that in me. Then I looked at my reflection in the hallway mirror, bruised, tired, but upright. I picked up my phone and typed a single message to an old journalism professor I once admired. "What do you know about publishing a truth they don't want told? Send." The invitation came in the form of an email. Subject line: "Let's talk from Carter, not my father." It was worded with the usual Drayton polish. Professional, distant, firm. "Let's meet. Dad wants to clear the air. Just the three of us. No drama, no media. We can fix this." Fix, as if I were a leaky faucet. I stared at it for a while, then showed it to Lena. "Go," she said. "Not for them, for you. Go see who they really are when the mask drops." We chose a neutral location, a private room at a law office downtown. No waiters, no cameras, just 4 walls, fluorescent lights, and a silence thick enough to chew. I arrived first. Carter walked in next, wearing a navy coat that probably cost more than my monthly salary. He nodded, not meeting my eyes. Then came Jaime father Michael Drayton, flanked by his assistant, who quietly handed him a folder and left. "Harper," he said, settling into the chair across from me like a king taking his throne. "You look tired." I didn't answer. Carter cleared his throat. "We're here to make this right." Michael leaned forward. "You made a mistake. That's forgivable. But what you're doing now, pushing this into the public involving Lena digging into financial records, that is reckless. So is slapping your daughter in front of 100 people," I said. His jaw clenched. It was a moment of frustration. "You called me useless. You embarrassed me." I laughed, a small bitter sound. "You hit me in public and somehow you're the one embarrassed." Carter finally spoke. "Harper, no one's saying it was okay, but there's a way to handle this without blowing it up. There's no clean way to handle abuse, Carter." Michael slid the folder across the table. "This is a non-disclosure agreement," he said. "Sign it and we move on. You get a settlement quietly with dignity." Dignity. He used that word like it was a commodity he could buy back for me. "I'm not signing anything," I said. "And I'm not staying silent." His eyes sharpened. "You realize if you go through with this, we will respond. With legal action, character witnesses, documentation of your instability." Carter looked uncomfortable. "We don't want to go that far." I turned to him. "Would you let him hit your wife?" He flinched. "Your daughter." More silence. "Then why is it different when it's me?" He looked down. No answer. I leaned in. "You stood there and watched me bleed, and now you're asking me to protect the man who did it." Michael's voice dropped into a low growl. "Your behavior has always been emotional, dramatic. Lena taught you that. This rebellion of yours, it ends now." I stood. "No, it begins now." He stood too, voice raised. "You are nothing without this family. You think Lena can protect you? You'll be back. You always come back." I walked to the door, then paused. "You don't know me at all. And that's the only reason you thought I'd stay quiet." I didn't slam the door. I didn't need to. The silence behind me was louder than anything I could have said. Outside, I stood under the gray sky, breath fogging in the winter air. My hands shook, not from fear, but from release. They had shown me exactly who they were. Now I was free to show the world. I didn't go home after the meeting. I went straight to Lena's. The moment I walked in, she looked up from her laptop and asked one question. "Are you ready to burn it down?" I nodded, and we began. Everything we'd gathered, the recordings, the voicemail, the old journal entries, the sudden property transfer, had been sorted, time-stamped, and backed up on 3 encrypted drives. Lena handled the technical logistics. I handled the voice. That night, I wrote the truth, not just about the slap, but about the years before it. I wrote about what it felt like to grow up invisible in a family obsessed with appearances. About being told I was too sensitive, too emotional, too much. About the dinners where I was mocked for having an opinion, the birthdays forgotten, the rooms I was expected to clean up after the real guests had left. I told the story that every perfect family hopes no one ever tells. Then we hit send. An investigative journalist, Stone, of Lena's former contact, Shad, agreed to run it. He verified the documents, cross-checked the financial transfers, matched my journal notes to real estate filings, to tax records, to witnesses who remembered just enough to confirm the cracks. We timed the release. Christmas Eve, the same night as the annual Drayton Foundation Gala. The irony wasn't lost on me. I didn't have a ticket. I didn't need one. The venue was glass and gold, tucked into a hilltop hotel where rich people toasted each other for pretending to care. I wore a simple black coat and walked into the lobby like I belonged because I did. Not to their world, but to the truth. Inside the ballroom, lights glittered overhead and waiters floated past with champagne laughter heels clicking, crystal clinking, just like the night of the slap. Except this time, I was the one holding the match. Across the room, I saw him, Michael Drayton, on stage giving a speech about dignity and family values. Cameras flashing, people clapping. At exactly 8:05 p.m., phones started buzzing. One, then five, then dozens. Screens lit up with breaking news. Exclusive: Drayton family empire under scrutiny after allegations of abuse, financial misconduct. The Seattle Standard. The article hit hard. Names, dates, documents, audio, even the voicemail. Don't embarrass this family further. The room rippled. Whispers rose like a wave. A donor walked out, then another. Michael's voice faltered. He glanced at his assistant, who was pale and already dialing her phone. Carter stood near the side curtain, hands clenched, jaw tight. Then Michael snapped. This is a smear campaign. She's unstable, vindictive. But the microphones were still on and the cameras were still rolling. For once, the world saw what I'd always seen. I didn't wait for the rest. I turned and walked out. Coat wrapped around me, heart thumping like thunder. Outside, the night air was sharp cold, but for the first time in years, it didn't bite. It braced me. My phone buzzed in my pocket. Messages from strangers, from old classmates, from women I didn't even know. Thank you for speaking up. I thought I was the only one. You made me feel less alone. Michael had built his world on silence. Tonight, I'd turned that silence into a storm. I moved into a tiny apartment above a bookstore. 3 weeks later, one-bedroom brick walls, no marble floors, no imported chandeliers, just the scent of old pages and the sound of wind rattling the windows. It was nothing like the Drayton estate, which meant it was everything I needed. For the first time in my life, I chose where to place my furniture. I chose the colors on the wall. I chose silence, and not the kind forced on me by power, but the kind that feels like peace. The news cycle moved fast. Within days, Michael was under investigation for financial misconduct. Sponsors pulled out, board members resigned. Carter went quiet. He sent one email. I hope you find what you're looking for. I didn't reply. Lena visited every Sunday. She brought tea, new books, and stories that made me laugh until I remembered I could. One morning, I opened an envelope that had no return address. Inside was a note written in sharp, unfamiliar handwriting. You destroyed the family. Hope you're proud. I folded it slowly and dropped it in the trash. Because I wasn't proud, I was free. I started volunteering at a women's center downtown. I taught writing workshops, helped survivors craft their stories, not for courtrooms, but for healing. One of them asked me, "How did you know it was time to speak?" And I told her when the silence started sounding more like their voice than mine. That night, I sat by my window, knees tucked to my chest, watching the Seattle skyline blink in and out behind the fog. Somewhere below, life went on. People hurried to dinner. Laughter echoed between buildings. I sipped my tea and picked up my old notebook. The first page still read, "The night he hit me." But the last page was blank. I opened to it and wrote, "This is the first night I don't feel like I have to explain myself to anyone." Then I closed the book, not to forget, but to move forward, because I wasn't his useless girl anymore. I never had been.